Im dritten Teil unserer Reihe zum 20. Jahrestag der Terroranschläge auf das New York World Trade Center widmen wir uns den besonders mysteriösen Fakten und mehreren toten Zeugen. Es gibt von den Terroranschlägen des 11. September 2001 diverse TV-Bilder, die einen Reporter während einer Live-Schaltung zeigen. Man sieht, wie er einige Blocks vom sogenannten Ground Zero entfernt ausgebrannte und schwer ramponierte Autos und sogar LKW zeigt, während Papier unverbrannt auf den Straßen liegt. Da diese Fahrzeuge definitiv nicht von Trümmerteilen der eingestürzten Türme getroffen wurden, stellt sich bis heute die Frage, was hier passiert sein könnte.
Hier sehen wir sogar, dass der Motor mit anderen Teilen des Autos zusammengeschmolzen ist. Schwenken wir rüber, sehen wir ein anderes Fahrzeug. Es sieht aus, als wäre es im Krieg gewesen. Wie Sie sehen können, sieht man im Innern noch Papiere, die aus dem Gebäude geflogen sind und alle anderen demolierten Teile. Und man erkennt daran, wie zerstörerisch die Wucht war. Auf der anderen Straßenseite sieht man ebenfalls ein extrem deformiertes Fahrzeug. Die Leute versuchen herauszufinden, was für eine Art Fahrzeug es war. Auch hier ist das Fahrzeug in einem üblen Zustand. Viele Dinge, zum Beispiel der Stahl, sind geschmolzen. Auch hier eine ähnliche Szene. Das Auto brennt, das Papier nicht.
Diese Bilder gelten für manche als Beweis dafür, dass am 11. September 2001 eine Art Hochenergie-Strahlenwaffe eingesetzt wurde. Eine angeblich vom US-Militär entwickelte Geheimtechnologie. Diese Theorie wurde von Dr. Judy Wood, einer amerikanischen Wissenschaftlerin, in ihrem Buch Where Did the Towers Go? Erstmalig in den Raum gestellt. Dies zu beweisen ist natürlich schwierig, was nur zeigt, wie komplex dieser Fall insgesamt ist. Umso wichtiger wäre eine neue und wirklich unabhängige Untersuchung des Kriminalfalles 9/11. Des Weiteren gibt es auch Aufnahmen, die ein Fernsehteam dabei zeigen, wie es in das mittlerweile evakuierte WTC-7 läuft und dort von einem Secret Service-Agenten gebeten wird, das Gebäude sofort zu verlassen.
I think you should leave. Everybody else is gone.
Okay.
I'll just make sure that there's nobody else coming
What do you
downstairs.
think happened?
I hear the top of the building fell down. Fell over on us. I don't know. I haven't seen outside yet.
Have you, when were you here?
Pardon me?
Here after the planes landed?
As a matter of fact, we're standing right underneath 6 World Trade when the building actually, the plane hit it the first time.
Describe it.
Yeah, a plane, the engine screaming, and then just an explosion. Glass. Then everybody was running around, trying to get away.
Tell me your name and spell it.
Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T-E.
Sergeant?
No, Secret Service.
Secret Service? How do you want your title?
OST.
OST, thank you.
Zudem sind die Türme, wie im zweiten Teil bereits erwähnt, förmlich pulverisiert worden. Dennoch fand man im Schutt der Türme den unversehrten Reisepass des angeblichen Attentäters Saddam al-Suqami. Wie das genau passiert sein soll, wurde auch nie wirklich erklärt.
FBI tells NBC News it was some distance from Ground Zero that a civilian found a passport lying on the street belonging to one of the suspected hijackers.
Da von den Zwillingstürmen praktisch nur noch Schutt übrig geblieben ist, ist es wohl kaum möglich, dass ausgerechnet dieser eine Reisepass das Ganze unbeschadet überstanden hat. Ebenso seltsam ist es, dass das FBI nach den Anschlägen in seiner Fahndungsliste Osama bin Laden zwar als die Nummer 1 der meistgesuchten Menschen führte, jedoch nie wegen der Anschläge des 11. Septembers. Auf Anfrage musste das FBI zugeben, dass man dafür keinerlei Beweise hätte. Doch umso mehr man von den Ereignissen rund um 9/11 erfuhr, umso grotesker wurde das Gesamtbild der offiziellen Version. Die BBC veröffentlichte infolge der Terroranschläge einen Artikel, der sich auf Informationen des französischen Geheimdienstes berief. Demnach soll der damals schon schwer nierenkranke Osama bin Laden 2 Wochen vor den Anschlägen in Dubai in einem US-Militärkrankenhaus behandelt worden sein und dort auch den ansässigen CIA-Attaché getroffen haben. Zurück nach New York. Der sogenannte Ground Zero wies bei den Bergungsarbeiten bis in den November noch sehr hohe Temperaturen auf. Viele Feuerwehrmänner berichten davon, dass sie bei den Räumungsarbeiten immer wieder auf Herde von noch flüssigem, geschmolzenem Stahl stoßen, vergleichbar mit kleinen Flüssen aus Lava.
molten steel. Molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava.
Nicht wenige dieser dort tätigen Feuerwehrmänner sind in den Jahren danach zum Teil an Krebs und anderen schweren Krankheiten verstorben.
Im Januar und Februar 2002 wurde klar, dass ich sehr, sehr krank war. Ich konnte fast nicht mehr laufen, fast nichts mehr essen. Ich konnte nicht mehr atmen. Matthew Tartaglias Zähne fielen aus.
Besonders auffällig im Kriminalfall 9/11 ist auch das massive Zeugensterben. So starben zahlreiche wichtige Augenzeugen oder Whistleblower, zum Teil auf äußerst seltsame Weise in den Jahren nach den Terroranschlägen. Hier seien nur einige prominente Beispiele von dieser langen Liste der toten Zeugen erwähnt. Barry Jennings war ein wichtiger Augenzeuge der Ereignisse im 7. Turm des World Trade Centers.
Explain to me the moment of impact.
Well, me and Mr. Hesh, the corporation counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
Der niederländische Sprengmeister Danny Jowenko, der als einer der ersten beim Anblick des Einsturzes vom WTC 7 von einer kontrollierten Sprengung sprach und einige Jahre später mit seinem PKW gegen einen Baum krachte. Ebenso seltsam ist auch die gezielte Tötung von William Cooper, der schon vor dem 11. September 2001 über gezielte Anschläge in diversen Radiosendungen berichtete.
That Osama bin Laden is planning to attack the United States of America and Israel. And I'm telling you, be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden.
Doch die Liste der mysteriösen Todesfälle ist wie gesagt noch weitaus umfangreicher und würde wohl mehrere Sendungen ausfüllen. In den Bereich der mysteriösen Zufälle lassen sich wohl auch die zahlreichen zeitgleich stattgefundenen Luftraumübungen des US-Militärs einordnen und sorgte dadurch angeblich für Verwirrung bei den Fluglotsen.
War es bloß ein Zufall, dass an diesem Tag Kriegssimulationen und Manöver geübt wurden? Inklusive simulierten Flugzeugentführungen, Flugzeuge, die in Häuser krachen, mit simulierten Radarpunkten. NORAD und die FAA waren verwirrt. Ist das real oder eine Übung? Wir haben Meldung von 11 Flugzeugen, die vom Kurs abweichen. Wir wussten nicht, ob es noch mehrere gab.
Doch die schier endlose Reihe an Zufällen ist damit noch nicht zu Ende aufgezählt. An der Wall Street gab es Wetten auf den Kursabsturz von Boeing, American Airways und anderen Firmen. Eine Schweizer Universität ging diesem Sachverhalt nach und stieß nach langer und mühseliger Recherche auf ein Firmenkonstrukt, das man mit der CIA in Verbindung brachte, die diverse Wetten vor den Anschlägen platziert hätte. Dass allerdings die CIA auch tatsächlich hinter diesen Firmen steckte, konnte man jedoch nie wirklich beweisen. All diese vielen offenen Fragen sind bis heute natürlich ebenso wenig aufgeklärt worden wie die 9/11-Anschläge an sich.
As fast as we possibly can and making sure that it's accurate at the same time. So
Donald Trump is on the line. I mean, we know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan. And of course, Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Well, I have a window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it. And even, I think worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I'd see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone, and it's just hard to believe.
Donald, Alan Marcus here. Your building is, the Trump Tower, is one of the great tourist attractions in the world. It's well known universally. Are you taking any precautions there in light of what happened at the World Trade Center?
Well, Alan, we've always had, as you know, very, very strong security, but there's very little you can do about planes crashing into a building. I mean, you look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him because I assumed maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he was in his office, and he was getting ready to move into the World Trade Center over the next 2 weeks. So when I just spoke to him, there's nothing you can do when people are going to be bombing planes at your building. Now, I guess maybe the world is going to be changing, and maybe you're going to have F-16s flying all over the city, etc. But it's a pretty tough situation.
Donald, you have one of the landmark buildings down in the financial district, 40 Wall Street. Did you have any damage, or did you know what's happened down there?
Well, it was an amazing phone call I made. 40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest. And I just spoke to my people, and they said it's the most unbelievable sight. It's probably 7 or 8 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and yet Wall Street is littered with 2 feet of stone and brick and mortar and steel, and there are thousands of people walking over the debris over the Brooklyn Bridge, where they're sending them out over the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, and then I guess they're going to have to figure out how to get home from there. But they have between 1 foot and 2 feet of debris right in front of a building that's probably, you would say, Alan, 6 or 7 blocks away.
Donald, this is Roland Smith.
Hi, Roland.
You know, how you doing on this kind of day? You know, at some point, we're going to put all this behind us. And you, as a visionary, particularly in New York real estate, what do you think that we ought to do as a city, as a people, when all of this gets, when the mourning stops, when the dead are honored, and we've found out what caused it and maybe corrected it? What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened. I was so disappointed when they closed the stock exchange, but of course, at some point, you had no choice, you know, when they initially announced it was closing, because you want to just say, the hell with it, you're going forward, nothing's going to change. But the fact is, something has changed very dramatically. And I think one of the very sad things is going to be when you look at the skyline of New York, which has become so emblazoned in your own memory, and you look at the skyline of New York and you see these buildings, these 2 buildings, whether you love them or don't love them, they were a great part of the skyline. And then when you look at the skyline after 2001, and you're going to see a skyline without these 2 buildings, you're going to say, what happened? People won't believe it. You know, when you show your children or your grandchildren in years to come what New York looked like in the year 2000, and then what New York looked like just a year later, they're going to say, what happened?
Hey, Donald,
it's hard to believe.
In the year 2000, Donald, you considered running for president. If you had done that and if you had been successful, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Well, I'd be taking a very, very tough line, Alan. I mean, you know, most people feel they know at least approximately the group of people that did this and where they are. But, boy, would you have to take a hard line on this. This just can't be tolerated, and it's got to be very, very stern. This is, as you and I were discussing before, Alan, this was probably worse than Pearl Harbor. Many more people are dead, and you know, they don't know, they have no idea, but I have somebody that was down there who witnessed at least 10 people jumping out of the building from 70 and 80 stories up in the air. I mean, you probably have 25 or 30,000 is the number I've heard, but I would think would be much more than that. I think the most of the damage will be caused not by even in the building in terms of the people dead, but by the people on the streets from falling debris.
Donald, you're probably the best-known builder, particularly of great buildings in the city. there's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly, because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Donald, one last question for you. Given the magnitude of how much of American commerce took place within the Twin Towers, what do you, as you're an expert on this, what do you think is going to be the fallout over the next several weeks, months, and even years, given what we have lost in terms of those buildings going down and all that was within it?
Well, I, as an example, Alan, and you might use them too, but I have an insurance company that was on the 102nd floor of the World Trade Center. They're gone. I don't know who's gone. I don't know anything other than their offices are no longer there. They're wiped out. The Morgan Stanley Group, you know, Morgan Stanley, a big, powerful firm, they had 50 stories in the building, gone. I mean, you're talking about some firms that are just gone. Now, Morgan Stanley, in that case, had a lot of its offices in Midtown, and they had about half downtown. Morgan Stanley's a big, powerful firm. They're gone. Many firms had all of their offices, as you know, in the World Trade Center. It was 8 million square feet. 8 million square feet is the size of some cities. And we had 8 million square feet in the world, 4 million in each building. They were huge buildings, not only in height, but, you know, each floor was 50,000 feet. They were monstrous floors. Each floor was almost a city in itself, and they had 110 floors or so. So, you know, many firms that were easily recognizable for those of us in the financial worlds, for those of us that read the papers and see the financial pages, they're going to be gone. I mean, they're just not going to exist anymore. They're gone.
Donald Trump.
Many of the people are gone with them.
Donald Trump, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you all.
We really
Good luck.
appreciate it. Thank you. Same to you.
You too.
Our prayers are with everyone.
Wow. That apparently does look like it is in the other building at this point. back off. They're telling us to back off.